directors. So I suppose it would be appropriate, first of all, to acknowledge the terrible situation in Ukraine at the moment, where we seem to have an unprecedented, unprovoked attack by Russia in the guise of President Putin on Ukraine. So I'd just like to read this statement out in support of the people of Ukraine. The thoughts of this council are with the people of Ukraine at this terrible and deeply worrying time. We also send our best wishes to all Ukrainians who are currently living and working in Lincolnshire and will be so worried for the welfare of their families and friends in their mother country. We hope to be able to offer support to families and individuals suffering at the hands of the Russian invasion, and we will participate with any government actions which are decided upon. Thank you. Are there any further statements? Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chairman. Just in terms of the Ukraine, I'd just like to add some further background in terms of the economic side of what's going on there. There are not huge amounts of businesses working from Lincolnshire with the Ukraine, but we do export around £8 million worth of goods to the Russian-Ukrainian market, and we also import about £13 million worth of goods. 150 local businesses in the county export to the region and 60 businesses import. So quite clearly, some of these businesses will be very worried about what's going on and the impact it may have on their businesses. So the business unit will work with any businesses that are dealing with the fallout of the Ukrainian action by Russia and try and support them and work with government to enable that support. So that deals with Ukraine. I've got two further announcements, Chairman. Firstly, as you'll be aware, the government has been looking for the last few months for locations for the new Great British Railways HQ. Rather than rushing like many places did to put in an expression of interest immediately, I wanted to consider whether there was a location in the county that could house that facility and would actually tick all the boxes that government wants. And working alongside officers at South Kesteven District Council, we have come to the conclusion that we will submit Grantham as a possible location for the new Great British Railways HQ. It's got a long railway heritage history. The railway came to Grantham in 1850. In the 30s and 40s, it was the absolute centre of the railway industry. There were 60 of the biggest locomotives were based at the Loco Depot in Grantham, including Mallard and the Flying Scotsman for a period of time. The location of Grantham, of course, 100 miles north of London on the main line, the east-west trajectory to Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, and to the southeast, I think makes it a really strong location. I think also the land ownership around the railway station, most of which is in the hands of National Rail, makes it a perfect site for it. And I think also the key thing I would say is there is a public vote in terms of the short list of applicants for this, and we know there's going to be a lot of competition, but I am very clear that Greater Lincolnshire will get behind this. If there's a chance to vote for Grantham, I'm certain that Lincolnshire and Greater Lincolnshire would want to support it. So we'll be putting in the expression of interest. It'll be a joint bid by ourselves and South Kesteven for Grantham to house the new Great British Railways HQ. So thank you for that. The other thing I just want to say is members will recall that in our announcements of support for the local economy last year, we've set aside some money to support the visitor economy sector and particularly the Visit Lincolnshire website and Business Lincolnshire in terms of regenerating and supporting businesses after COVID. You'll probably be aware that the Hollywood Reporter recently announced that the UK would overtake Hollywood as a centre for film and television production. It's an industry that's worth $7.7 billion a year. Lincolnshire has a long history as a location for Hollywood films and for television series, and we have more films coming into the county in the near future. We have Napoleon, which is the new Ridley Scott film shooting in Lincoln next month, and recent TV shows such as Strike, which filmed in Skegness last week, the new Batman movie that's opening that was filmed at Burley. So we have a rich history going back many, many, many decades in terms of Lincolnshire as a film and television destination. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable the Visit Lincolnshire website and Business Lincolnshire to be a central point for people looking for film and television locations in the future, so we can attract some of that big spend into the county. And it is the greatest advert possible for Lincolnshire. Our big open skies, our amazing coastline, the wonderful history and heritage of our place, the beautiful buildings we have. Why shouldn't we get some more of this stuff happening in the county? So we'll enable Visit Lincolnshire to do more of this and create that one-stop shop, open door policy for people looking for locations. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any further? Councillor Bradwell?
Sorry. Yes, just to advise the executive that on Friday we've got the Chief Inspector of Ofsted, Amanda Spellman, coming. And this is as a result of the innovation in SEND and the regional work that we've been doing. So we're really pleased that we're being recognised for all the work that has been happening over the last year or so. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any further? Andrew, I think we've had our final piece of the budget jigsaw this morning.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, so we had the announcement around the highways funding just come out this morning that we've had shared with us by colleagues nationally. Unfortunately, it currently shows that the funding is for highways, obviously, which is a big part of the debate around the recent budget setting, will be cash frozen at the 21-22 levels up to the period 24-25. So obviously clearly not the outcome that we've been hoping for in terms of the campaign for government, but happy to pass back to you with that news.
Obviously, yeah, not a total surprise, but disappointing nevertheless, but yeah, good. Okay, but there is some flexibility, I think, around the edges, but obviously we'll have to look at that. But okay, so okay then. So unless anybody else has got any further announcements, I'll move on to item 4, which is the minutes of the meeting held of this meeting on the 8th of February. Is your wish I sign this as a true and accurate record? Agreed. Thank you very much. Okay then. So now we move on to item 5, which is the residential nursing care fee levels for adult care. It's obviously an important paper, and I don't know who's going to. I think we'll go straight to. Sorry, Glenn. Well, obviously Wendy can't be here, so if you'd just like to start, then please.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, Pam Clipson and Alina Hackney from Finance and Commercial Services have been supporting the Directorate as part of the team working with Linker and all the key providers in Lincolnshire, trying to find a satisfactory solution to finding a good rate for an appropriate level of care, a quality level of care across the county. It's been particularly difficult this year. We would have hoped to have delivered a 3-year financial agreement, but the level of uncertainty at an economic level in terms of future legislative change have all meant that we feel it is far better to recommend to members that we go for a 1-year financing agreement, although a 3-year specification. And I'm more than happy, Leader, to hand over to either Alina or to Pam to contribute further, if that would be helpful.
So, Alina, would you like to just give us the highlights, please?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Yes, I'll draw out the key points from the report, and just to say that the report has been drafted alongside the Chief Legal Officer. So as Glenn said, just in terms of the service overview, we currently spend approximately 125 million on residential care each year. So it's one of the adult care's highest spend and risk areas. The sector have played a significant role, particularly over the last 2 years, given the impact of COVID, and members will be aware that 100% is commissioned from the external market. There is no in-house provision. So currently, at any one time, there's in excess of 2,500 placements made. As Glenn's alluded to, typically we do have a 3-year contract length, and that did expire last March, but was extended given the uncertainty. So we've had a programme of review of work that's been undertaken to determine what the new arrangements will be from the 1st of April this year. That really formed 4 elements, the programme. So the first element, and particularly very relevant, is the rates themselves. And we have a tried and tested model for this in terms of bringing in a third party to work alongside us to determine what we believe a fair rate is. This is the direction of central government at the moment, where authorities across the country are undertaking this work. But as I say, it's something that's been tried and tested in previous years in Lincolnshire. So as part of that independent work, they reviewed our cost model in terms of determining whether that was fit for purpose. There was a second element to the programme, and that was the review of the contract and specification. And as part of that, we did a fundamental review in terms of how we commission placements from the sector. And we've also looked at the quality standards, which are particularly relevant. Lincolnshire, we've continued to go in the right direction in terms of care homes either being judged as good or outstanding. However, unfortunately, we've just slipped in this last year in terms of being at the national average for that. So it's a particular key focus for us in this next generation of contract. The third element was the consideration of move to gross payments as part of these new contract arrangements. So a completely different infrastructure going forward, and one, I have to say, that's been very welcomed by the sector. Sorry, I should also say, in terms of the usual cost, as we've already gone to the market in terms of that proposal, which I'll feed back on, which leads really nicely in terms of the fourth element is the engagement with the market. This is particularly relevant and really important, given that, as I say, 100% is externally commissioned. They've played a key role. We very much see them as our partners. So if I can just feed back in terms of the independent review, I'm pleased to share that the Care Analytics, who were commissioned to do this piece of work, firmly believe that the existing basis for the rate construction remains feasible. What they also, in terms of their findings, said that the growth in older people is mainly largely coming from the larger organisations who are focusing on the self-funder market. And that's very relevant. You know, our data is certainly, we've seen over the last 3 years more and more where it's very much tailored to self-funder market. They also concluded that we need to do some further work around mental health and physical disabilities. The market was surveyed. We took a very open book approach in terms of understanding what the rates were, but unfortunately the feedback from this part of the sector was very limited. So the recommendation was for us to do some further work with them. And a very similar approach in relation to learning disabilities. We did construct a new fee structure 3 years ago, which has worked really well. But the recommendation was for us to identify different purchasing models for commissioning these types of services, given that we have seen an increase of outer authorities commissioning in Lincolnshire. So other factors they asked us that they identified was the impact on the market as a result of COVID-19, the volatility in relation to utilities in the insurance markets, And therefore their recommendation was that although we enter into a 3-year contract, that we only establish usual costs for the next 12 months, and that we have a review on the annual rates in years 2 and 3. I'm just going to pause there. Oh yeah, I can see Pam's now joined us. Pam, can I just ask you to cover off the cost modelling, please, and what's been taken into account?
Yes, thanks, Alina. Good morning, everybody. The 2021 market assessment that we did included average costs submitted by the 50% of the providers that came back. So across all of the wages for the staff across the sector and all of the non-pay elements in running their care homes, we've built in the average cost across those. And then on top of that, we have built into the rates in front of you the 6.6% increase for the national living wage that will come in from the 1st of April 2022. We've built in the 1.25% increase in national insurance contributions that providers will be covering. And then for elements of non-pay, we've reflected a 4% increase aligned to the comprehensive spending review published in December. But we do recognise that things have changed since then, and that will feed into the hardship funds that we'll come on to in a couple of slides.
Thanks, Pam. So just to conclude, the fourth element around market engagement, it was really critical to this process. And at the end of November, we shared with the sector the findings from this independent review. In December, following the commissioning board, we also shared the proposed rates with the sector and started the consultation process, which concluded at the end of January. We received 23 provider organisations responded to that consultation, which represented about 1/3 of the marketplace. And we also consulted directly with Lincolnshire, which is the care association representing a large proportion of the sector. The main themes from that market engagement are very much touch on the points that Care Analytics identified in their work, and that there was quite a lot of representation made regarding the rising costs of the utilities. That was presenting a significant risk in terms of the long-term sustainability of these homes. There were also incidents of rising costs of insurance, and just as an example, one provider cited that the additional costs could, in terms of utilities and insurance, could exceed £1,000 per week. There was also, they identified the national insurance increase, and unfortunately, when we sent our proposed rates out, the very next day, the government made the announcements around the additional funding in terms of working towards a fair cost for rate care and then national insurance. Given that, obviously, as Pam's alluded to, we've now corrected the model to take account of those additional funds. And one of the other areas that the sector raised was the significant workforce challenges. And I'm pleased to say that we're just about to go live on a significant media campaign in terms of raising the profile of the workforce with the aim of trying to secure much better retention and rates. So finally, just in terms of an outcome, as Pam's alluded to, the market sustainability and the Fair Cost for Care Fund is significant in this work in terms of the direction of travel we're moving in. The proposed rates that have been attached within the report for you take account of the additional funding. It also takes account, following the consultation, the establishment of a hardship fund to address the volatile aspects. So I'm particularly referencing the utilities and insurance, recognising that it would be not sensible for the sector to completely bear that risk. And as it describes in its title, where a provider can demonstrate hardship and risk to the long-term sustainability of that establishment, they can apply to the council to support them with some of these additional costs. Monies have been put aside for that for a maximum of 12 months, and we will review on a 3-monthly basis in terms of any claims made against that fund. And in addition, finally, we've also concluded as part of this work the need to establish a programme of work around block purchasing and the review of the specialist services market. And that's to look to achieve, to try and secure long-term provision in Lincolnshire for specialist placements, given that we have seen a bigger increase out of county in terms of securing these places in Lincolnshire. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, Councillor Marfleet, it has been to adult scrutiny, so would you like to just summarise the debate there? Has anything been circulated? Yes, we've had the... Yes, that's been circulated. Thank you.
Morning, thank you. In summary, we, the committee, support the recommendations and the rate. There's been extensive research gone into this with a 250+ page documentation on it. And I think that there's no doubt the council has engaged with the sector, and there's a clear understanding and there's an openness which is incredibly good. The rates have been put forward and all agreed. I think they offer a fair reflection under the current situation and the market conditions. And we, you know, as I said, a very comprehensive report. Issues to really sort of come out is that the gross payment figure is taken forward, and that is appreciated by the care industry and simplifies everything. The setting of the 1-year fee is very good. It allows us to sort of be flexible going forward in uncertain times. There was issues raised about the 4% inflation rate, whether that is accurate or not. At the end of the day, it's what we've got to start with. It's what we're working with, and I think it's a fair reflection. The Hardship Fund, there was talk about the Hardship Fund, and there was a couple that raised their concerns whether there was enough in the Hardship Fund. Lincolnshire was supportive and thought that the amount was appropriate. It is there for those sort of key reasons of insurance and utilities. So from a committee, we just highlight that there might be a risk there, but we think it's generally okay, but just to be kept an eye on. The other area is, as Alina has said, further works requiring to be carried out regarding the funding models, and especially the development of further block purchasing for learning disabilities, mental and physical health, to explore and fine-tune those markets better for efficiencies and for the offer to the people of Lincolnshire. There is a sense, and we have to be quite careful, but new builds in care homes do tend to be for the larger, more centralised and focus on self-funders. And with that in taking on board, actually they don't necessarily go for the council contracts, which means that actually our council contracts can often rely in care homes in rural areas or smaller care homes, or and so we sort of need to be aware that there is also a sense that we can actually help some of these care homes diversify in terms of providing daycare opportunities within their locations. And you know, if they're in a rural village, there's no reason why they can't look for other contracts to help support and diverse their own economic benefits. So that's something that we do as a council, where perhaps actually a bit more empathy, not empathy, but more energeticness put into that to support that market. And finally, it does allow, with the way that this contract is set up, to really take on board the adult social care reforms that are coming with us, and will allow us to be flexible in managing and meeting the needs of those that require the service. And I think really that's the summary of it.
Thank you for that. Just so people are clear, this is a proposed a deal with the care sector, but obviously not necessarily will be accepted by every care home. That is just so we're clear on that. This isn't agreed by everybody, but we're confident that most of the sector will accept these rates.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, of course, we would hope for as much coverage across the whole market as possible. The legal requirements on the council is to ensure that we can meet identified need with an appropriate level of service and offer choice. So the majority of the market would be sufficient to satisfy the legal requirement. In the past, we've been able to secure the vast majority of market providers in the county, and I'm rather hoping that with Lincoln's support we will be able to secure that this time around as well.
So I'd just like to focus on this Hardship Fund, which I support, because obviously, as you said, there's a lot of turbulence at the moment, and inflation and government changes, so it is very uncertain. So I think pragmatically, especially as the rates we are proposing are competitive, shall we say, with other councils in certainly the region and certainly nationally, understand the logic that you don't want people to price in what may be temporary. Inflation might come down again, we don't know, and all sorts of things will change. So rather than people price in the risk, if you like, but I suppose the other side of the coin is that these are all businesses. So what sort of, in terms of value for money, if a business is failing, for want of a better word, is there a risk that the council will be, putting money into a failing business? And frankly, is that really what we want to do? So I just want how we're going to be, in terms of financially, and also for the residents that say it's a failing care home, we don't want them in there if it is failing. So I've just wondered what protections are being put in to just counteract that.
Thank you, Leader. I think one of the key elements for us in Lincolnshire is the length of and the quality of the relationship that we've got with the sector. We meet every week with colleagues in the marketplace. That involves finance colleagues, commercial colleagues, and my operational teams, along with the Care Quality Commission. So it's a really rounded picture based on a really solid relationship, one of trust and respect. That's really important in making sure that we make the right decisions and supporting those homes where, one, we're concerned there might be an undersupply in a given area of the county, but also where that home has got, as it were, a really good rating with CQC or has got opportunities for improvement. There will always be, in a market of our size, organisations that leave the marketplace. But we would expect them to be relatively small in number and to be able to manage the transition, particularly for the vulnerable adults using those services over time into other suppliers. So there's something about improving the quality, which Alina talked about, making sure that we're investing in sustainable businesses, but also ones that we want in those locations around the county that give people choice within a reasonable distance of where they live. It's one of the benefits, and Councillor Marfleet talked about, the nature of the market in Lincolnshire is nearly 3/4 small to medium enterprises. That means we've got a really distributed model around the whole of the geography of the county. That's an advantage in a place like Lincolnshire, where the majority are smaller providers operating in smaller communities. We think we've got a really good understanding of that marketplace, and it's on that basis that we think we would be probably making, as it were, the right kind of investments to sustain individual providers. And of course, it's not just a decision taken within one part of the council, it's shared with finance colleagues, with commercial, and with my directorate as well. I don't know if Alina wanted to add any more?
I'm not entirely sure that fully answered the question, because the issue is there going to be a criteria where we say, well, business A will give you some hardship, business, we won't, because that will be a judgment. I'm just interested how that could be worked. So I don't know whether...
Yes, indeed, Leader. There would be a criteria, and I've alluded to elements of it, but Alina will give you greater clarity.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just come back on a few of those points there, because I think it'd be really helpful to give you an insight and hopefully some assurance. We have benefited in the past with 98% of the market signed up to the arrangements. And I must make it clear that following the decision from executive, we will formally go to the market with this revised offer. The indication, the signal is that you know, the vast majority of providers hopefully will accept this offer, but obviously that's something that we'll have to brief you on as March goes on. Certainly what I can say is that in scrutiny, Melanie Weatherly, the chair of Lincoln, did confirm that the process was robust and they felt that the offer was fair. In terms of your question, Councillor Hill, yes, there will be criteria and that there is an oversight programme in terms of looking at the use of how those monies are spent. So it's not a case of them just making a case, and it is an open book approach in terms of them seeking that support from the Hardship Fund. So we will, if you like, vet to make sure that it is absolutely they fulfil the criteria in terms of hardship. And then there is a programme, an oversight programme in terms of the use of how that money has been spent, and there will be evidence that they'll have to supply in respect to that. You also asked about failing visits, and Glenn did failing businesses, sorry, and Glenn did allude to this. We have a number of processes that monitors the compliance in terms of quality and financial that happens on a day-to-day basis. So we have a number of triggers that will indicate to us either that there are concerns about the financial stability of that provider, and if that is the case, what we put in place is something called loss of provider. So these things don't come to us out of the blue. We tend to see well in advance if there are concerns. We have arrangements, for example, with utilities companies if providers are not paying their bills. And also in terms of quality standards, we have something called service quality review, where partner agencies come together, and we have a programme of work in terms of the oversight of those providers where there are risks playing out. So there's a really robust process in terms of making sure that any provider who is at risk of failing, that we get early indications of that. But in relation to this fund, this pot of money, as I say, they'll have to reach a criteria, and then they will have to evidence the use of those monies. Pam, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I was just going to add a bit further assurance. So this isn't new to adult care. This is very similar to the Sustainability Fund that we put in place when COVID-19 pandemic first opened our doors. And the way that we do it, the providers who approach the fund have been very happy to open up their profit and loss, their cash flow projections, and all of that is taken into account. Their additional costs are evidenced through invoices, and then that review is taken through our adult care DLT before any payments are made. So this is basically building on that system we had in place across all of our providers. That's what we're proposing we will run again, however quarterly, not weekly, that we had in place during the pandemic. So we can stand back up that process from 2020.
Councillor Davies.
Thank you. I think my question's probably been answered. It was just around clarity with regards to the phrase open book accounting was mentioned, and just concerned that some of these organisations candidly historically have made good money, and I would be nervous about funneling more money into them without clear evidence of financial need. So it would appear from what the speaker was saying that we do have access into their full accounts, so we can check that, just for that absolute clarity.
Yeah, that's correct.
That is correct. And we also ask for their usage of their own cash reserves as part of that process as well.
Because we could all generate a P&L that makes it look like we're not making any money, couldn't we?
We could absolutely. And part of the work that was done was to compare their actual published accounts, not just something that they generate.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'm happy to support. It seems like a very good scheme.
Just one other point. I mean, we, you know, previously I've had discussions about council facilitating sort of group activity, like we've talked about insurance going up, which is a big problem. And again, there's utilities. So I just wonder, in terms of what can the council do to facilitate that, or help the sector, shall I say, come together to not be picked off individually. So I just wonder if there's any what work's been done around that sense.
Oh, sorry, Glenn.
Yep. Yes. Thank you, Alina or Pam.
Okay. Yes, so there is a piece of work underway in terms of group buy-in. We're particularly looking at utilities at the moment and looking at particular frameworks across the country where we can support this. We feel it's a quicker win in relation to insurance. The utilities is certainly more challenging in this current environment. We're also looking at other areas of work where we can support. So, for example, recruitment and the retention of nurses has been something that's been quite significant for the market. So certainly there is a programme of work in place to how we can work as a collective. We've demonstrated how effective that can be in the community support type services, and this is something that we've now embarked on into care homes. There are some different factors that play out across the county, but we believe this will support the long-term sustainability for providers where we can get a collective offer for them.
Thank you. Anybody else contribute? Yes, Councillor Rodwell.
Wanted to come in because I have actually sometimes been to some of the residential care meetings that have been going, and I know how difficult it is, because it has been, and it probably will be for a year or so with the COVID-19. And I know as well from what the council did for providers during that time has held us in probably good stead for the conversations that we've been having to have now, because I don't think any other council across the country went in as quickly as we did to help them with funds during COVID. So I think that work that we did then has helped. I think genuinely the providers understand we're trying to do as much as we can, but clearly we're still waiting for the Care Act to go through and to understand, you know, if that is going to bring us some substantial additional funding for this sector. But they do a very good job. And just to give the leader probably a bit of confidence, I have, when I was doing this job a year or so ago, you know, we just get a home failing sometimes very quickly. You know, the owner can be sick or something like that, and we have to find new places for the residents. Other times it can be something to do with CQC. So I have to confirm what Alina has said. They are on the case of watching homes that may be, you know, slightly having problems, and they're there working with CQC and actually public health as well, because we have nurses there as well. So I think, you know, we do a very good job, you know, supporting the residential homes and actually supporting people in Lincolnshire who need that care at a particular time.
Thank you for that. Yes, I do. There is a good relationship. So, Debbie, certainly during the pandemic, we did support them very well, but not just by, you know, the support was there, but it was actually, you know, upon request, not just spraying money out. So, I don't really just, which is why that legacy is carrying on with a very good relationship with them.
Yes, thank you, Leader. So I think that we were very fortunate in that we'd already set up an infrastructure through Linker there's a range of providers and a number of providers, but through Linker it means that we can have one single strategic conversation and engage all of the providers. So with that infrastructure in place, it clearly makes relationships much easier for all of us to hear the voice of the sector and negotiate and collaborate with the sector. I think we've learned a lot over the last 2 years in terms of how we can support the sector to work together. And absolutely, I think that there is a bit of a deeper understanding that whilst we'll clearly be fair and equitable to everybody and all providers, providers will have specific challenges at specific moments in time, and that we need to respond proportionately to them, recognising that one size doesn't fit all within that sort of strategic framework. And I think that through COVID, we've got a very mature relationship, which thankfully is with the support of Linker.
Thank you. Right, okay. Unless there's any further contributions, the recommendations are there on page 16 and 17. There are 7 recommendations there. All those in favour of the recommendations, please indicate. Thank you. I think that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, we then move on to item 6, which is Learning Disabilities Section 75 agreement. So the same team. Oh, Justin. Right, thank you.
Thank you, Leader. So, just as an introduction, Section 75 of Section 75 of the Health Act 2006 actually freed up flexibilities that allows either councils to delegate functions to NHS commissioners or providers, or the other way around, the NHS can delegate functions to councils. And the Section 75 agreement I'm here to talk to today is actually a commissioning Section 75 agreement for adults with learning disability. We already have a Section 75 agreement in place. It's been in place for over a decade, and what it actually does is it facilitates a pooled budget which is hosted by the County Council, a lead commissioner arrangement, so the County Council acts as the lead commissioner, and it also provides an integrated assessment and care management function for the people that are supported via these arrangements. The agreement is between Lincolnshire County Council and the Lincolnshire Clinical Commissioning Group. I'll just move on. So, in terms of to give you an idea in terms of a summary of what sort of things are actually included within the Section 75 agreement, I mentioned the assessment and care management function, and what it actually allows is for the council to provide an integrated service for the people that are supported in the agreement. It's actually the CCG puts funding into the pot and the council puts funding into the pot, and then it pays for the assessment care management function and also the services that are commissioned to support those people. What's funded from the agreement is actually either continuing health care, which is an NHS responsibility, or adult social care, which is an LCC responsibility. Predominantly, the services that are commissioned are either commissioned directly by the people we support through direct payments, or the council commissions those services on behalf of those people. The types of services that are commissioned do include residential care, as discussed in the former item, but we also support people with other services in the community as well. So services like community supported living, day services, a small amount of transport as well. At any one time, we can support in the region of 2,500 people with learning disabilities through this agreement. And to give you some context in terms of the numbers of people who are health related and those that are adult care related, we actually have currently 121 people who are fully funded continuing health care. We have 2,191 that are fully funded social care, and then we have 176 people who are in receipt of continuing healthcare and adult social care and therefore are jointly funded. There are also 18 people who have eligible needs under Section 117 of the Mental Health Act. So they're entitled to services free of charge. But again, we commission them on behalf of the council and the CCG. So from a individual's perspective, one of the key elements of a Section 75 agreement for it to actually be able to, for us to be able to enter that legally, is that it must demonstrate that it would lead to benefits that wouldn't be able to achieve if we didn't enter into those arrangements. So it's got to lead to improvements. And certainly in terms of the people who are supported by the agreement, one of the key things is that it's a much more joined up service, a much more joined up experience for adults with learning disability. So everyone within the agreement will have one key worker. There's a single care and support plan, a more integrated approach to quality assurance of the care, and we've had and demonstrated and continue to demonstrate good and strong assessment and reviewing performance. Without those arrangements, actually the CCG would have to have an assessment and care management function, and the council would have that. So the people would have two lots of people they had to talk to about their care plans and the assessment arrangements there. There would be duplication and fragmentation. There's also benefits to us as partners. So as part of these arrangements, we split the cost of the assessment and care management function 50-50. So it provides good value for money in terms of transactional costs as well as better quality oversight. And we also have an agreed and negotiated formula for how we should fund the individual packages of care. So if it's fully funded healthcare, health pay 100% towards the cost of that. If it's fully funded adult social care, we pay 100%. And then we have a negotiated formula for joint funding those, where we split those 65-35. Without those arrangements, again, in other places, there is a lot of negotiation on individual packages of care. So if it was somewhere else in the county that didn't have these integrated arrangements, use a lot of time, of officer time, and really bun fighting over who pays what for these cases, which isn't the case in Lincolnshire. Again, trust and confidence between commissioners in terms of our assessment and care management teams applying the arrangements appropriately. So in terms of the existing Section 75 agreement formally comes to an end on the 31st of March this year, and we'd previously extended this agreement, so and effectively a new agreement had to be in place. And the proposal is to have a new agreement in place for 5 years, but with the ability to extend it for a further 2. Again, LCC would act as the lead commissioner, the host for the pool budget and the provision of the assessment and care management function. The only real changes to these proposals are around how Section 117 costs are going to be funded going forward, and we've negotiated a stronger position from the council in terms of that, where for the more complex cases, health will pay more and will pay a lower percentage. The other thing is also to be able to revise this agreement to allow a new Section 75 agreement to be proposed to the council within the next financial year coming, to look at the development of a complex case Section 75 for people with more complex needs. And that if that was agreed by the council, then we would need to tweak this agreement in some way there. So what we didn't want to do is if the executive are in support of this agreement, to then have to come back next year for permission to amend it slightly. The agreement has been endorsed by Lincolnshire's Learning Disability Partnership Board. They are a group of experts by experience, either having learning disability or carers for people with learning disabilities. And just one other point is that this agreement is being proposed and taken through a parallel process within the CCGs, so the CCGs will also need to agree to this agreement. There are two recommendations. One, that the Executive Committee approves the establishment of a new Section 75 agreement between Lincolnshire County Council and the Commission and the Lincolnshire Commissioning Group for adults with learning disability based on the principles set out in the report. And the other is that the Executive Committee approves the Executive Councillor for Adult Care and Community Wellbeing and the DAS to agree the annual risk share agreement on behalf of the Council, again within the principles set out in the report.
Thank you, Justin. That's great. Thank you. Councillor Marfleet, obviously it's been to adult scrutiny.
Thank you. Yes, just to summarise that this is in effect it is in effect a pooled budget between LCC and the health providers of the NHS through the CCGs, supporting just over 2,500 people with a spend of the council of about 66.5 million and the health CCG colleagues of 19.5 million. It represents good value and it showcases partnership working without us getting absorbed into the NHS world. It keeps us all operating in our own, what we call best, what we do best. And it capitalises on what we do best from both parties. The Scrutiny Committee supports the recommendation and welcomes this. Points which really sort of came out from the committee discussions was the agreement document itself is about somewhere in the region of about 46 pages, which is an agreement between ourselves and the NHS, which in some sense, when you actually read the document and the agreement, it actually has all the correct words in that you would want to see in an agreement. I sometimes wonder though, and it's not for us here, but it is a government thing where should we need such complicated agreements between two providers of health and care services within Lincolnshire? We are there, but then we have the appendix which goes on even further into the detail. And I suppose in some sense my only worry about the agreement itself is that if it's in effect prevents innovation and allows us, because we're quite prescriptive in that agreement, and it's something that we should just be mindful when within the agreement we talk about innovation, which we need to do with such sort of costs and going forward. But it is, as we said, it showcases partnership working, it's proactive, and one would hope that other areas outside the current scope can be included in the scope going forward. Finally, if the CCG does evolve, which it should do, into ICBs, then the actual contract itself rolls over in accordance with the new formation of that. And a last area, which is sort of, and I suppose it relates to the appendix, and it is Appendix 9, and the supplementary appendix, which is about service specifications. The word assessments and more assessments is highly reflected in that. And the word assessments crops up at most of our committee agendas, and the word signposting, which is in effect the real direction of where we need to be incredibly efficient. And I really have to sort of, and I promote that from a committee and myself, that actually emphasis on being slick at assessments, reducing those times, and really good signposting, front of house for adult social care is absolutely really important going forward. And it's something that we really need to look at and keep an eye on, is how we do operate a very efficient front of house for adult social care. But this agreement is very welcome. It is really good that we work so closely together with the NHS, and that should be encouraged for them to use our abilities and specialities as much as we use them to develop for the people of Lincolnshire. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo. Good. Yeah, I mean, I fully support this. It has been very successful. I talked to colleagues from other councils across the country, and they are constantly complaining about costs getting out of control, and they're putting millions and millions of more in every year. And I think the model we've got in the main does seem to work very well, having that, and saves, and there's all the saving in terms of commissioning stuff, shall we say, because it's done collectively. Can I just ask about then, in terms of, if we agree to this, how future costs are agreed? Can you just explain that, how that happens under this system? Because, you know, with percentages are agreed, but how do we manage the overall quantum?
Thank you, Leader. So we will apply the wider improvement work that we're doing across the council to this pool budget as well. So the areas that Councillor Marfleet talked about around the front door management and in terms of looking at achieving best use of resources and improving value for money, which is already very good. We'll, in terms of that wider adult care approach, we will apply it to this Section 75 agreement as well. So that will help to achieve value for money. In terms of the individual criteria around how the percentage splits, traditionally what we have done is we look at benchmarking information in terms of other local authorities and CCGs in terms of how they're funding joint funded packages, but we'll also apply some audit work as well to actually do that. We do believe that we got a very good negotiated offer around the 65-35% previously, and that actually, you know, that there will be risks about opening up those negotiations again. It could go up as well as down. Yeah.
I wasn't talking about the percentage, I was talking about the, obviously I'm assuming that most of this, once people, as Councillor Murphy said, once you're assessed, the rate, there is a prescribed national rate or whatever. I'm not sure about that, you know, not being an expert in this.
Yeah, so I mean the cost of individual packages of care will vary according to people's needs. Overall, volume of demand and complexity demand is increasing. So I mean this is about managing costs to get the best value of money, and the best way to do that is working in partnership with the CCG and the council, using the council's commissioning expertise, not duplicating each other's tasks, but also managing the market effectively as well.
Are there any challenges back from our commissioning decisions if we're doing, because that's where the control is, isn't it? From, say, mental health or indeed users.
Generally, again, the feedback that we've had in terms of our quality assurance exercise is always really positive in terms of the ask-off returns, and generally, again, our CCG colleagues are pleased with the overall value for money that we achieve for both of us.
That's great, thank you. And under Appendix A, page 274, the staffing of 1.6 million, that's all commission, which is our cost, isn't it? That's all commissioning work.
The staffing is people that we employ, yeah. So it's a mix of professionals, both social workers and learning disability nurses and community care officers as well. So we employ those as a council, but we share the costs of those equally with the CCG.
Thank you. I'm delighted to support this paper, and has already been said that the fact that this particular Section 75 has been 10 years in the making just shows how well developed those relationships are in Lincolnshire between health and ourselves. And I know it's some time ago now, Councillor Bradwell and Glenn, but we were wheeled out, weren't we, at one point, down to number 10, because we were one of very few places in the country that had got these arrangements in place. And I'm delighted that I think it's today that the Health and Care Bill actually comes back into the House of Commons, and within that bill there is agreement that Section 75s will become more used and indeed easier to use. So we were obviously going in the right direction a long time ago, which is often the case in Lincolnshire. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any further contributions, please? Okay, the recommendations are on page 280, and those are, as Justin has laid out, they are to basically we approve the establishment of further Section 75 agreement and effectively delegate to the Executive Councillor for the detail. Is all those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Move on to the next item, which is, let's have a look, I believe is item 5. No, it's not. It's item 7, which is Revenue Budget Monitoring Report, Quarter 3. Andrew.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, members. And I'm joined by Michelle Grady, Assistant Director for Finance, on the line as well for any questions. A relatively brief update for you today. So the financial position of the Council has been under plenty of debate recently with the recent budget process. Obviously, the report, just running through the key headlines, sets out an underspend of just over £7.3 million for the 21-22 financial year. It's an improvement of about £1.5 million from the report that we had covering the first half of the year. Within that, there are quite a few variances, and I'll just take a couple of seconds just to sort of briefly run down those. But just reflecting the debate that was had in the council chamber, really, on the 18th of February related to the budget. This is a sort of gross underspend position, if you will, in terms of some of the expectations that we'd put towards members for recommendations at year end. There's a significant amount of funding related to domestic abuse that would request to be carried forward as part of those year-end processes, which would net down that underspend somewhat, probably in the region of about £1 million. So I just wanted to put that on the record. Amongst that as well, as you'd imagine, as we come towards the end of the financial year, there's been plenty of crystallisation of costs and or underspends elsewhere in the organisation. Most notably, and a key part of the debate around the budget setting process was around the home to school transport budget, and you'll see within the paper that the cost pressures related to that have increased significantly, albeit, as we said, as part of that process, we're all aware that there's a significant project in place to manage the cost and demand profile over the next few years within there. And I think the key point I wanted to make was particularly around COVID costs, and again that came up in the budget debate recently. You'll see in one of the appendix we've received and have expended around about £80 million in this financial year related to COVID. Contributing towards the underspend is a real judicious approach to coding costs related to COVID, away from sort of council local taxpayer funded initiatives onto COVID related costs, which again has been another contributory factor towards that underspend that we've been reporting in the paper, albeit acknowledging that in some related areas, particularly like public health, for example, costs will be incurred in future years related to that. So that was all I had to particularly say, Leader. I'm happy to take any questions. Obviously, clearly, CLT colleagues are here as well to cover any particular detail in their areas also. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Andrew. Any questions, please? Oh, sorry. Councillor Smith, I do apologise. Welcome. You're standing in for Councillor Parker, so
I am indeed,
these papers went to scrutiny.
Thank you. Please excuse my voice. I'm dealing with this slight tail end of man flu, so excuse my voice. I'll summarise my comments because I know the full comments have been circulated, so if you'd like the full comments, I'm sure Nigel or myself can send them to anybody that wishes to have them. In terms of the revenue budget, the main comments were around the additional 10 million for highways in the 21-22 budget would be spent over a period of 3 years on various initiatives such as rural roads and gully works. It was explained that 2.3 million of reserves from the COVID-19 grant was no longer required because of changes to the rules around grants. Of the 7.366 million underspend, 900,000 would be transferred to a reserve for domestic abuse activities, as Andrew's previously alluded to. Directorates would also be able to carry forward 1% underspend as is common practice within the County Council. It was also explained to the board the difference between the general reserve and the reserve for financial volatility. And as has been alluded to, we were told the fair funding review was due to take place in the spring, and we're waiting very much on the precipice for that, because that will obviously depend on how we move forward as a council. And thank you very much, Leader.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Tom. Questions, comments? I mean, on the highways, it was agreed that the money would be more effectively spent, being pre-planned effectively. Where's Andrew? Andy gone? Oh, there he is. You know, he moves around. He moves around, Andy. All right. So with that, the thought was pre-planned work is more cost-effective than just trying to spend it all very quickly.
Yeah, as you know, our overall strategy is around prevention rather than repair. We obviously invest quite a lot from our asset management point of view to actually make sure that actually happens. We still need to get the right balance to deal with the sort of here and now issues that occur in our network, but obviously the announcement this morning, the confirmation of the 3-year settlement from DfT will mean, unfortunately, over that 3-year period, we will be buying less with the money that we've got when you factor in things like inflation. So it won't get any easier over the next 3 years, I'm afraid.
Thank you for that. Any further comments, questions? Nope. Okay, do you agree to note the report then? Is that agreed? Thank you. Move on then to capital, up to date. So is that you again, Andrew?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Potentially an even briefer update than the previous paper. Obviously, we'd appreciate that this is a programme report covering the 10 years of our expenditure in the capital programme. Again, like the setting of the revenue budget, we go through a robust process of assessing costs and or reprofiling, and I guess the eagle-eyed amongst you all will notice that the in-year forecast related to this, and that's spend related to this year, has been radically reduced from around about 40 million to around about the 23 million pound remark, and that is predominantly related to the rephasing of the Spalding highways projects into later years. Clearly also as well within that, there are variations within the block budgets which council have set aside for specific areas, but they're the two main reasons for the changes in the forecast that we've got set out today. So again, happy to take any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any questions? Pretty straight. Yes. Also, Councillor Smith, it went to scrutiny.
Thank you very much, Leader. As Andrew said, my report's even briefer because there were no additional comments on the capital budget monitoring report for 21-22. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. No comments, questions here either? Okay. We move you again to note the report. Is that agreed? Very good. We then move on to the final item, which is the Corporate Plan and Success Framework. So who's dealing with this? Looks like it's you, James. unless Andrew's on. Sorry? Caroline Jackson is on her way physically or on the... here she is. We'll just pause for a moment, let Andrew and Caroline... We've reached your item, so we'll just wait a few minutes to let you settle in.
If it would help, Leader, I could go through scrutiny comments if yep, no problem at all.
So Smith, you'll do the scrutiny comments, and that's great.
No problem, Leader, thank you. There have been some questions asked around how cardboard and paper recycling, which was due to start in West Lindsey, will be handled, especially those in terrace houses and those who don't have space for an additional recycling bin. We were reassured that the concerns of residents would be addressed by a flyer being sent out to all residents. It was also on the West Lindsey website as well for those that wanted to look online. It's also been posted there. There was some concern that the ambition of enabling everyone to enjoy life to the full would be a challenge for some due to economic hardship and rising cost of living, and also a concern about how this would be measured in terms of how we measure it as a council. There was an explanation given as to why Lincolnshire had fewer children in care than other local authorities with similar levels of deprivation, including the council's investment in early help and support to families. It was good to hear that the council would be raising concerns with the CCG about waiting times for children's mental health treatment. There was some discussion about the customer strategy and digital strategy, making it easier for customers to access the council, but the board stressed the need to cater for those who did not have access to online services. It was also highlighted that there had been an increase in police officers and police vehicles on Lincolnshire's roads, which was certainly welcomed by the board as a whole, and especially those of us that lived in a rural division. Thank you very much, Leader.
Okay, Caroline.
Thank you. Apologies
Thank you.
For being a little bit late. Page 459 in your pack is the start of the report. As we all know, the report is there to outline the progress we're making against the priorities in our corporate plan. We also know that there are two ways that we report this. One is through the key activities that underpin that delivery, and one is through key performance indicators, which you'll all be familiar with. We have slightly changed the RAG rating for the activities based on comments from last time, from quarter two, so that we're very much clearer around those that we have a concern around. And of the 32 activities that are in the report today for quarter three, 28, so 88% of those are actually progressing as planned, and you can obviously see all of that detail on the council's website. The 4 activities where the current milestone is amber rated, and by that we mean that the current milestone is slightly behind, but the overall activity is still on plan. So a very, very early kind of indication that that one element within the activity may not be quite performing, but overall we're still confident that the activity will deliver. So in terms of the ones that they are, in terms of supporting high aspirations, activity A10, which is around the net zero carbon emissions, again, we are still progressing that as planned, but there was a small delay in the launch of the climate change partnership there is a delay because of the government community resilience funding, and obviously, as we've discussed previously in committee, alternative funding sources are now being explored. In terms of activity A12, which is about maximising the reuse and recycling potential of the county's waste, we do continue, and a point that obviously was raised and discussed at OSMB around the workshops that were undertaken with district council partners and the paper and a card bin rollout that Councillor Smith has discussed. In terms of activity A42, this is around our people strategy. Again, the refresh is continuing, but there has been some aspects of the people strategy paused to enable key activity around staff attraction and retention to take precedent over other aspects of the strategy development. And the final activity is A47, which is around our customer strategy. And again, the strategy is progressing, but elements of our digital strategy, our customer digital delivery activity needs further work to improve that range of self-service solutions in order to ensure that we can reduce that demand at our contact centre and ultimately reduce costs. So they're the 4 activities that are very, very headline in terms of some elements that are not proceeding as we initially had planned, but overall the activity will still deliver. In terms of the key performance indicators, so we now have 2 types of key performance indicators reported in the quarter 3 report. You'll remember we had a number of measures that had targets already set, but we also had a significant number of measures that are what we're calling contextual measures, so don't have a target or ambition against them. So in terms of those key performance indicators where we have a target set, 8 of those can be reported in quarter 3 reporting, and of those a really positive picture to show that 6 of them have met their target, those being percentage of children in care living within a family environment, the percentage of schools that are judged good or outstanding, the percentage of pupils in outstanding or good schools, the percentage of 16 and 17-year-olds not in education, employment or training, days lost to sickness absence per FTE, and the percentage of people who remain at home 91 days after hospital discharge. So a really positive picture in relation to those KPIs. The two measures that haven't met their ambition, again, we have spoken about these previously in committee, the first one being around percentage of super fast broadband coverage in residential and business premises. There's a very lengthy commentary within the report that explains how and why we have not achieved that target, and that relates to the growth in the number of premises now included within the count. And also, as we're all aware of, equipment delays that have been impacted are worldwide issues around such as semiconductor shortages and availability of radio equipment. So some significant sort of global impacts in relation to our ability to deliver that. But there is also an explanation there around the move to actually gigabit capability, and that the intention being that we will have hit an 85% target date by the end of 2025. So hopefully a good explanation narrative about what we're actually doing to, I know, address some of the concerns that have been previously raised. And the second one is around the rate of children in care per 10,000 population. Again, OSMB had a long discussion around this in relation to, obviously we have seen an increase in the number of children in care. You know, some of that obviously in relation to the impact of COVID, but also in terms of the impact around taking on unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. And just to clarify in the report, of the 716 children that are reported at Q3 as being in care of the local authority, 31 of those were unaccompanied asylum seekers. We have had benchmarking data recently published in relation to children's social care, and both statistical neighbours and the England average have seen an increase, as have we, but we are still significantly below. And then obviously that does bring the question around, is low good? But in terms of our increase has been seen consistently across the country. In terms of the second type of key performance indicators, this is what we call contextual Kpis, so those where we haven't got a target or ambition set. But what each of the exec directors have done is looked at those that are within the reporting framework and said, which of those would we want to bring up to the executive in relation to those areas that we believe are performing well and those that we feel there is need for or areas for improvement. So in terms of those that are performing well, we've seen the overall crime rate reduced by 0.3% in the last 12 months, and also seen a decrease in antisocial behaviour. In terms of the ratio of business births and deaths, again, we've seen a positive picture in relation to businesses starting up within the county, and in total in 2021, there were 2,094 more business starts than in the business cessations in Lincolnshire, so again a positive picture. And similarly, those businesses that have survived for 3 years or more are showing a really positive picture of 58.7%. And finally, a measure that is booking the kind of national trend, which is visitors to heritage attractions. So we're seeing, compared to regional and national figures, a really positive picture. And we actually had twice as many visitors reported in Q1 in Q3, and since reopening sites, we've seen, you know, a really positive engagement from the public, particularly around some of the free grounds events at Lincoln Castle. The measures where we obviously are looking for improvement, the percentage of facilities rated good and outstanding by CQC in adult social care. Again, we are working obviously with the sector to ensure that where providers aren't meeting the requirements we expect, that there is provision and support for those providers, and that we have mentoring service managers in roles to ensure that we can support them and provide that resilience, and hoping to therefore see an improvement in that measure. In terms of complaints, again, an area we've discussed previously, we have seen a slight reduction in the number of complaints, but we still want to ensure that we can resolve as many complaints as early as possible, and want to ensure that we have put additional capacity in to support that, and therefore we'd expect to see this improve in future reporting. Similarly, as mentioned around the people strategy, we're hoping that the percentage of staff voluntarily leaving the LCC, we want to see an improvement in that as a result of some of the activities that we've put in place around retention, and that the people strategy work plan is really focusing on that, as well as a culture and leadership stock take, which will be undertaken shortly. And then finally, the kind of skills makeup within the county. Again, we will be looking at how that would hope to be shifted in terms of the lower paid skills and jobs that are undertaken and the proportion of that. And looking at how working obviously as part of the LEP and the skills advisory panel, that actually we'd see a shift in that kind of in some of the sectors that people are working in. Finally, in section 4.6 of the report, we have proposed a number of KPIs that we do want to set targets for, ready for 2022-23 reporting, and hope that committee are happy to approve those. So I'll now hand over for any questions.
Thank you very much. Yes, can we start with obviously the hard KPI, the children's one? Can you just what actions have been taken?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, so obviously, I mean, the question about whether it's a good thing or a bad thing was asked at OSMB as well, and we talked through the fact that what we need is the right children in care, and that's what's really important. It's important that we're quality assuring the pathway into care and benchmarking as well. We are still low, and we've just had a publication of some new data that confirms that we remain low in comparison to our statistical neighbours. And we think that's a good thing, and we're really clear that that's because the council's continued to invest in early help, continued to put children's services as a high priority. We've got outstanding children's services. We operate a signs of safety model, which means that we use all of our family networks. We work with families. We look for strengths within families and test them out to ensure that children can, wherever possible, remain with their families and thrive. So I'm confident that actually that's a good level for us and that we've got the right level, and that's been tested out by Ofsted and by peer reviews.
Thank you. So are you happy with the target? Because I'm not sure the target is appropriate. Debbie, do you want to come?
Yeah, I just want to come in because obviously since the target was set, the government have mandated all local authorities to take a proportionate share of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, which means that we are now taking more unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. So I think it's a fair challenge to ask, in light of that national change, whether or not there should be a change of the target to reflect that national mandation.
Thank you. Broadband, some issues raised there. I don't know who's... Somebody?
do you want me to pick that up?
Well,
thank you.
I'll leave it to you. Thank you.
Yes, so broadband, we're slightly below the target that we set. I think there's a fair explanation in the report around the issues that there are globally that are impacting on the supply at the moment. After saying that, I think the speed of broadband connectivity has significantly increased generally, and I think we are making some excellent progress within the county to meet that. I appreciate that if you are one of the small percentage that still can't, that doesn't help, but overall there's some really excellent progress being made, and we will get back onto target now quickly, and as I say, the speed of that connectivity is better than we'd originally planned as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Just the other one I want to pick up is the percentage of people leaving voluntarily, which is 8% or something. Is that what's considered a healthy percentage of people? Because on the one hand, you don't want too many leaving. On the other hand, you do want a healthy turnover. So I just wonder how this target is sort of was developed.
Thanks, Leader. So yeah, we've just, I guess the graph that you can see in the paper. Bring it up so I can try and explain it. As you see, pan across the graph, sort of the full year 2021, and the quarter starts from there. That was obviously the start of the COVID pandemic. Now, pre-pandemic, we were around about eight and a bit days, or 8% in terms of what the turnover rate was. then dipped to that 6 mark, and now it's sort of returned back to pre-COVID levels and is rising slightly. So it is a cause for, I guess, modest concern. The issue is and the work that we're doing at the moment to address further is around the specific areas where it's impacting most. So naturally, we don't want to be in a position where we are experiencing high turnover levels and extreme levels of agency usage in particular sort of important frontline areas like social work, for example, as that can be a cause for concern, and the HR function is working hard with service areas to try and mitigate that. I think the challenge in particular, and we've talked about it in previous executive meetings, I think around the Great Resignation, the turnover in the working world in general. The challenge we've specifically got here is what we're calling the fill rate, and that's the time it takes to fill the point from a vacancy to filling a post. And one of the things we are picking up on is it is taking longer to fill the right job first time, the right time, if that makes sense. And that's something that the paper makes a case and draws out around our approach to attraction and retention. Clearly, local government and terms and conditions are restricted to some elements. Clearly, we've got things around like the pay and grading system that can act as a barrier to that sometimes. So we are working through the implications of what we can do to increase flexibility to make those things work faster. There's things around making sure that the recruitment process is a slicker process. We've talked about the employment value proposition before as well, making ourselves the most attractive employer for employers. We're a great council, and we need to really, make as much of that as we can to attract people. So that's.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments, please? Not seeing any. So recommendations are there on page 459, which are the one that the performance is noted, and the second one is that the measures outlined in paragraph 4.6 are accepted. All in favour, please show. Thank you. I think it's unanimous, yes. Okay, well, that, I believe, concludes the meeting. Thank you for your attendance.